The soft sound of cutlery hitting plates filled the large dining room. You were sitting next to Jungkook at the long wooden table. The atmosphere felt warm and pleasant, but there was a slight unease in your chest. Across from you, his parents, Mr. and Mrs. John, were laughing as they shared stories from Jungkook's childhood. Do you remember the time Jungkook tried to bake me a birthday cake? Mrs. John said with a cheerful laugh. He accidentally used salt instead of sugar, and the whole kitchen was a mess. Mr. John laughed along, but he didn't give up. He kept trying to frost that cake as if nothing was wrong. You smiled softly, sneaking a glance at Jungkook. He sat quietly beside you, his expression calm but distant. His lips twitched slightly, almost like he was about to smile but didn't. I wish I could have seen that, you said with a small smile. Mrs. John's face lit up as she reached across the table to touch your hand. Ryan, you have been such a blessing to Jungkook. You are everything I hoped he would find in a partner. You smiled back politely, but her kind words made your chest feel heavier. That's very sweet of you to say. You replied softly, your voice steady despite the ache in your heart. Jungkook cleared his throat beside you, breaking the moment. She's been great, he said simply. His tone was calm, but you knew his way of saying that holds a different meaning. You glanced at him briefly, noticing how his attention stayed fixed on his plate. His words were just a part of act, the contract marriage you both agreed on to please his parents. Mrs. John decided to tease him a little. Jungkook, don't be so reserved. You should be shouting from the rooftops about how lucky you are to have a wife like Vian. Mr. John nodded in agreement. She has brought so much happiness into our family. You couldn't have chosen better. Both of your eyes met for a second, and Jungkook smiled, picking up his glass of wine. I know, he said briefly, but his tone didn't match the warmth in his parents' voices. You stared at their plate, moving the food around with your fork. Their words were kind, but they only reminded you of the truth. This marriage wasn't real, it was just a contract. Jungkook didn't love you, he only married you to keep his parents happy and to create a way to bring back the person he truly cared about, his ex. Despite knowing all this, you couldn't stop yourself from falling for him. Every small act of kindness, every moment when his cold mask seemed to slip, had made your feelings grow. But here you were, playing the perfect wife, knowing this was all temporary. How have things been at home, dear? Mrs. John asked, her voice pulling you from your thoughts. Jungkook hasn't been working too much, has he? I hope he's not leaving you alone all the time. You hesitated, glancing at Jungkook. He's been busy, but we make it work, you said carefully, trying to sound casual. Mrs. John's eyes softened as she smiled. You are so understanding, Ryan. I always prayed Jungkook would find someone as patient and kind as you. Jungkook placed his glass down. He thought you might be feeling uncomfortable by this talk. That's enough, he said quietly. She tilted her head, frowning. I'm just saying. Let's not make this about me, Jungkook interrupted firmly. The table went quiet for a moment, and you quickly stepped in to ease the tension. It's okay, Mrs. John. Mom. I'm just happy to spend time with all of you. Family dinners like this means a lot to me. Her smile returned, and she gave your hand a gentle pat. You are such a sweet girl, Vian. I'm so glad you are a part of our family. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but you couldn't shake the heavy feeling in your chest. Mr. and Mrs. John's kindness only made everything harder. They thought this marriage was real, and their affection made the truth even more painful. Beside you, Jungkook stayed silent, his mind seemingly elsewhere, but every now and then you caught him glancing at you from the corner of your eye. It was brief and subtle, but enough to make your heart ache even more. The car ride home was quiet, with only the sound of the engine filling the silence. You sat beside Jungkook staring out the window as the city lights passed by. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his gaze fixed on the road. I'm sorry about my parents, Jungkook said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost uncertain. I hope they didn't make you feel uncomfortable or pressured. You turned to look at him, surprised by his words. No, not at all. They are really sweet. I like how much they care about you. Jungkook sighed softly, loosening the grip on the wheel. They don't know the truth. I just don't want them to overwhelm me with their expectations. You shook your head. They are not overwhelming. I think it's nice how much they love you. I understand why they would want the best for you. He glanced at you quickly before turning his focus back to the road. Still, it's not fair to you. You shouldn't have to deal with all of this. You gave a small smile, even though his words tugged at something inside you. It's fine, Jungkook. I agreed to this. I knew what I was signing up for. He didn't say anything for a moment, his jaw tightening as if he was holding something back. Finally, he said quietly, You deserve better than this. His words caught you off guard, leaving you unsure how to respond. For a second, you felt a flicker of hope, but you quickly pushed it away. This was just a contract, that's all it ever would be. Thank you for saying that, but really I'm okay. Your parents are wonderful and tonight wasn't bad at all. Jungkook nodded slightly, his face seemed unreadable. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When he finally pulled up the car in front of the house, you unbuckled your seatbelt and turned to him. Good night, Jungkook, he said politely, keeping your tone calm and even. Good night. His voice was quiet, his eyes lingered on you for a moment before he looked away. You stepped out of the car and walked to the house, feeling his gaze on you until the door closed behind you. Leaning against the door, you let out a deep breath. You wished his words didn't affect you so much, but they did. And no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't stop the ache growing in your heart. Jungkook parked the car in the garage before going inside. You and Jungkook live in the same house but have separate rooms. Your relationship began one rainy evening when Jungkook found you in a bar, upset after your ex had left you. A stranger was bothering you, and Jungkook stepped in to help. Grateful, you both started talking and shared your stories. Jungkook told you about his ex-girlfriend who had left him, but he still wanted her back. He also mentioned that his parents were pressuring him to settle down. Seeing a chance to solve both of your problems, Jungkook suggested a contract marriage. This arrangement would make his parents happy and might catch his ex's attention. You agreed because it offered you stability after your breakup, financial support, and time to heal without the demands of a real romantic relationship. Now you both live together, maintaining the appearance of a married couple while keeping your personal lives separate. You were in the living room reading a book, casually unwinding after finishing some work. The quiet of the house was peaceful, and you were content with the calm. That's when the door opened and Jungkook walked in. Earlier than usual, his steps were quick, almost like he was rushing, and you couldn't help but wonder what the occasion was. You closed the book and stood up. Jungkook, you came back early. Your words paused midway when he suddenly hugged you. His arms wrapped around you and your heart skipped a beat. It was like a moment frozen in time and you felt your pulse quicken, unsure how to respond. I'm so happy, Wine. Finally the wait is over. His voice full of excitement yet soft. You gulped, still processing that he was hugging you. Your heart raced, unsure if you were dreaming or if this was real. But before you could say anything, Jungkook pulled back quickly. I'm sorry I got carried away, he said, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. The air between you both felt a little awkward, but you managed to smile, trying to ease the tension. It's okay, but what's the matter? A bright smile appeared on his face again, and you could see the excitement shining in his eyes. Whatever it was important to him, and you knew that whatever the news was, it made him truly happy. Mina is coming back. She's finally coming back from abroad, and his friends are throwing a huge party for her. Everyone is invited, and they asked me to come. You froze for a moment. Mina, his ex, the woman he had always been so obsessed with. You tried to hide the way your chest tightened. Oh, That's great. You said forcing a smile, but it didn't quite feel right. Jungkook didn't seem to notice. He stepped closer, still grinning. I've waited so long for this. It's finally happening. She's back, and everything is going to go back to normal. Yeah, that's really great. You said trying to sound happy for him, even though your heart wasn't in it. Jungkook's smile faded a little when he saw your expression. Are you okay? You don't look like you're feeling great. He asked, suddenly concerned. You quickly nodded. I'm fine, really, just a little tired, that's all. Jungkook looked at you for a second longer, still not fully convinced. You sure? You look a little off. I'm okay, really. He studied you for a moment, then sighed and gave you a small smile. Alright, but you should get some rest. It's a big night tonight. You smiled back, trying to hide the nervousness inside you. Yep, I will. Jungkook then brightened up again, excitement returning to his voice. Oh, and I really want you to come with me to the party. It will be fun. Please come. You hesitated, feeling the heaviness in your chest grow. You knew what this meant. With Mina's return, the reason of this marriage, the reason you were even here, was finally coming to an end. But you couldn't tell him that. You couldn't say no. Okay, I'll come with you. His face lit up. Really awesome. It will be great to have you there. You gave a small smile, but inside you couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Jungkook would be with Mina, and you would be left behind, just like you had feared. As you went to get ready for the night, you stayed on the couch, lost in your thoughts. The contract marriage you had agreed to help him win her back, was almost over, and you couldn't help but feel a little lost. Jungkook stepped into his room, his face still lit up with excitement. The news about Mina had him buzzing with energy, and for a moment everything felt right. He was one step closer to what he had always wanted. But as he walked further into the room, his eyes fell on the vanity. A small familiar object was sitting there, a necklace you often wore. His fingers instinctively reached out and picked it up. It wasn't anything too special, just a simple pendant, but it had become a part of you. He remembered when you had left it there a few days ago, just before he left for a meeting. He held it in his hand for a moment, staring at it, and something in his chest shifted. It was strange, this feeling. He hadn't noticed it before, not until now. Over the past 3 months, you and he had built a quiet understanding, not as a couple, not even as close friends, but something in between. You had helped him when things got tough. You had been there for him when he didn't even ask. Slowly, without realizing it, you had become someone important in his life. Jungkook let out a quiet breath, still holding the necklace, and a wave of confusion washed over him. He wasn't sure why it was bothering him now, but the thought of you and him, the little bubble you had created together, was harder to ignore. It was all supposed to end soon, wasn't it? Mina was coming back, and that was the end of everything between you and him. The marriage, the contract, everything. The life they had built, the one that was never real, was about to be over, but for some reason that realization hit him harder than he expected. He set the necklace down gently on the vanity, his mind racing. He had been so sure about everything until now. He had promised to get Mina back. He had told himself that he would do whatever it took, even if it meant being with you in this fake marriage. But as he stood there, looking at the necklace, he felt something inside. He couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't just the marriage, it wasn't just the contract, it was you. You had become a part of his life in a way that was deeper than he had ever anticipated. Your presence in his life, the way you cared for him without asking for anything in return, had begun to change him. He wasn't the same person he was when he first met you. And when he pictured his future now, it wasn't Mina standing by his side, it was you. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of the mess in his head. For so long he had pushed these feelings aside, thinking it was just the way things had to be. But now with Mina coming back, it was all coming to a head. He had to choose, and the thought of losing you, of not having you in his life anymore, it made his stomach churn. He never thought he would feel this way, but in the quiet of his room, surrounded by the weight of the necklace and his thoughts, Jungkook finally realized the truth. It wasn't just about Mina anymore. He didn't want to let you go, and the idea of going back to her, of ending things with you, suddenly didn't seem as appealing as it once did. You had become a part of him, someone he wasn't ready to lose, and for the first time, Jungkook wasn't so sure about what he really wanted. The party was in full swing, but you felt like an outsider in the middle of it all. You had expected the usual, Jungkook getting lost in the crowd as soon as Mina arrived. You thought he would forget you even existed once he saw her. After all, this was the woman he had spent years longing for. You were just a temporary part of his life, a means to an end. But that's not what happened. Instead, Jungkook kept you close, his hand lightly resting on the small of your back, guiding you through the sea of people. He was talking with others, but his eyes kept returning to you, making sure you were okay, his attention unwavering. You could see it in the way he smiled at you, how he laughed at your jokes, how his hand brushed against yours like he didn't want to let go. It made your chest tighten. You had expected a distance between you two tonight. Yet all you felt was the closeness he was holding on to. Then the moment arrived, Mina walked into the room. You felt your heart drop, your breath catch. She looked just like you remembered, beautiful, poised, confident. She glanced around before locking eyes with Jungkook, and you could see it in her expression. Jungkook's grip tightened around you just for a second before he turned to greet her. You expected him to turn cold or distant, to forget all about you and step into her world like nothing had ever changed, but that's not what happened. Wow, you have become unrecognizable, Jungkook. I'm glad you came. I was excited to see you the most. Jungkook smiled. Welcome back, Mina, and of course I have to come. She smiled and then her eyes fell on you before returning to Jungkook. So it's true that you married? Jungkook looked at you and you felt like you were holding your breath. Yes, I'm now happily married. His response left you surprised. Never for once he hesitated to accept, even though this was a contract marriage, yet he revealed it so proudly that you are his real wife. Mina smiled, but then she frowned as she looked at you. Wait, are you perhaps Ryan, Nick's girlfriend? Your heart skipped a beat, hearing your ex's name, hearing that she knew you. It was like everything frozen for a moment. You weren't prepared for this. Yes, ex girlfriend. You managed to reply, your voice steady despite the confusion rising within you. She smiled warmly, her eyes softened. Nick always talked about you. I'm happy to know you moved on. I hope you are doing okay. You could feel your stomach twist. Nick, the name echoed in your head, sending a wave of panic through your body. How do you know him? You asked, your voice trembling slightly. Mina looked at you for a moment, her gaze flickering with a strange sadness. Nick was a close friend of mine. He wanted to make sure you were okay after he left. I was with him in his last days. Your heart stopped. Last days. What did she mean? You felt a cold chill wash over you as your mind raced. What do you mean by last days? Mina sighed, her expression turning somber. Nick was sick, really sick. He knew he didn't have much time and he didn't want to leave you broken. He didn't want you to hate him, to feel abandoned, so he left without saying goodbye. Tears began to sting your eyes, but you didn't let them fall. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Nick, he was gone, sick. You thought he had abandoned you, left you with no explanation, no closure. All those years of wondering why he left, they had been for nothing, and the realization that he had been suffering in silence, far away from you, made your chest ache in a way you couldn't explain. Mina must have seen the confusion and pain in your eyes because she reached out into her purse and pulled out her phone. Nick left something for you. He wanted you to have it. And also, he was madly in love with you, Ryan. Even on the last day, he said he loved you and apologized for leaving you like that. She unlocked the phone and pressed play on a video. The moment you saw Nick's face on the screen, your world crumbled. His pale face, that faint smile he forced just for you. You wanted to cry your heart out. Ryan, Nick's voice came through, shaky but familiar. If you're watching this, it means I'm already gone. I'm so sorry. I know you'll be angry and I know you'll feel like I abandoned you, but I couldn't bear to leave you with the pain. I was so sick and I knew my time was running out, but I never wanted to hurt you. I love you more than anything and I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. You covered your mouth with your hands, controlling your sobs. Everyone present there left with teary eyes. The moment was so heartbreaking. Jungkook felt his chest aching seeing you broken. The tears started falling before you could stop them, your body shaking as the truth hit you like a tidal wave. All these years you had thought he didn't care, that he had abandoned you without a word, but he hadn't. He had loved you until the very end and he had made sure somehow that you knew that. The video continued, Nick's voice breaking with emotion. Please, Ryan, live your life, be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. I knew you won't move on if I stay with you until the end. But I wanted you to find someone who can hold your hand until the end, and sadly, it wasn't me. I wasn't that someone. Thank you for loving me, and I'm sorry for leaving without saying goodbye. But you were always in my heart, always. You couldn't breathe, the pain, the anger, the heartbreak, it all came crashing down at once, and you found yourself gasping for air, feeling like you were drowning in the weight of it all. You dropped on your knees, crying terribly. Ryan, please gather yourself. All this time, I hated him for leaving me, for abandoning me, and he was suffering in silence. I can't believe I wasn't there while he was in pain. I hate myself. Jungkook's face was filled with concern, his hand holding you gently but firmly trying to ground you. Why, no, you didn't know. You couldn't have known. You are not to blame for what happened. But his words didn't make it any easier. You had spent years convinced that Nick didn't care, that he left without a second thought, and now you had the truth. But it felt like it was too much to handle. The guilt, the loss, the regret, they were suffocating you. It's okay to hurt, Ryan. It's okay to cry. But don't blame yourself for something you couldn't control. You didn't know, and that's not your fault. He hugged you tightly. You clung to his words, trying to let them sink in, but the weight of it all was too heavy. You had loved Nick and you had lost him without any closure. You had carried that pain for so long, and now that you knew the truth, it felt like a part of you had been ripped away. You pulled back slightly, wiping your eyes, but the tears kept coming. I don't know how to live with this, how to accept it. All this time I thought he didn't love me, but he did, Jungkook. He really did. Jungkook gently cupped your face, his thumb brushing away the stray tears. He did fine, and he would want you to find peace with this. You deserve to heal, to be happy again, and you don't have to do it alone. I'm here with you. I'll help you through this. You nodded. He then excused himself before walking you towards the car. Everyone left in tears, including Mina. She already knew the story and the fact that Jungkook was the right person for you. She knew he'll definitely help you in healing. He'll walk you through life and give you the love you deserve. When you finally stepped into the house, you didn't even bother taking off your shoes, just stumbling into the living room, still wiping away tears. Jungkook followed closely, his heart heavy watching you break apart. He sat you down on the couch, holding a glass of water in front of you, trying to calm you, but your hands trembled as you pushed it away, unable to even look at it. Wine, please drink something. You shook your head, burying your face in your hands, the sobs shaking your entire body. Jungkook didn't know what to say. He couldn't find the right words. All he could do was hold you, pulling you into his arms, feeling you break against his chest. He let you cry, not saying anything, just being there for you. His own chest felt heavy, like his heart was being crushed by the weight of your pain. Ryan, I know this hurts, but you're not alone in this. I'm here, okay? I'm here, and I always will be. You shook your head again, the pain in your voice breaking through as you spoke. I don't want you to do this for me, Jungkook. You don't have to sacrifice your life for me. I don't deserve it. Jungkook pulled back slightly, holding your face gently with both hands, his eyes intense as he looked into yours. Who said I don't want to live, Ian? I want to live. I want to live every single moment with you. I don't care about anything else. You stared at him in shock, your tears slowly stopping, the words sinking deep into your heart. Jungkook, he held you tighter, his forehead resting against yours. Vine, I've realized something. I don't want this marriage to end. I don't want you to walk away from my life. I want to live every moment of my life only with you. I want to be with you no matter what. You blinked in disbelief, your heart pounding in your chest. This wasn't the confession you had expected, not in a million years. But there it was, raw and real. Jungkook didn't want to let go of you. He didn't want this marriage to be a lie anymore. Jungkook, are you sure? You whispered, your voice barely a breath. Yes, Ryan. Jungkook replied softly, his hands gently wiping away the last of your tears. I've already said everything I need to. I'm not letting you go. Not now, not ever. In that moment, everything seemed to shift. The weight on your chest began to lighten, the suffocating guilt and regret starting to fade away. For the first time, you weren't so sure about the future, but you knew that with Jungkook by your side, you didn't have to walk through it alone. Thank you. Jungkook smiled softly, pressing his lips to your forehead. No more tears, okay? We'll get through this together, you and me, always. You nodded slowly, feeling the warmth of his embrace. In his arms, for the first time in a long time, you felt a sense of peace. And no matter what the future held, you knew one thing for certain, you were ready to face it with him.